Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm here with Lauren Shiro today, who's 32 from Los Angeles, and she is currently in the pursuit of recovery from addiction. She's doing really, really well, and we're going to sit down today and we're going to have a conversation about her journey, her life journey into addiction, her journey into recovery, what tools she uses now to help her in her recovery, and kind of the current state of affairs right now out there, especially in California and Los Angeles, what she's seeing today. And maybe she can share with us some ideas of what we can do to make things better for people that are out there struggling, particularly people that are out there on the street. So, Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I met you, it's been, I guess, about a year since I've known you. So, and you're down in LA,
Mhm.
you're in recovery, you're doing all the right things, you're working, you have a place, you do all that stuff. Could you tell me a little bit about your background, what it was like growing up, and what are some of the things that kind of led you to fall into addiction?
Basically, I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional and alcoholic household. So my mom was started drinking for as pretty much as early as I can remember, and my parents decided to remain married, but they never had a functional relationship. So constantly being in that chaos and around the madness that is addiction and alcoholism was really all I ever knew. And my mom's drinking really caused my dad to spiral into a really deep depression, who already actually in the line of work he worked in was he like had to sleep during the day and then work at night because he worked with people overseas. So it's like I didn't have my mom there because she was always, away dealing with her addiction and what goes along with that. And then my dad wasn't really available because he was suffering with his own emotional, distress. So it was pretty much just left up to me and my brother for the most part. I feel like, or emotionally, felt like we were kind of taking care of and raising ourselves. We were often pawned off on our grandparents for weekends or a week or who knows. My dad's mom, my grandma, she actually came out from Wisconsin and had to stay with us and take care of us for a while because my parents were basically just kind of not available. I also had like a lot of issues in school. I was extremely bullied because I was like this weird tomboy. So I always felt like when I was at home, I wanted to be away and be at school. And then as soon as I got to school, I remembered, oh, I don't want to be here either. Like, this is awful. So I really never felt like there was a place for me where I belonged. And that caused a lot of emotional and mental baggage to just compound over the years. So I think that's kind of where it all started for sure.
When we talk about drugs and using drugs to self-medicate,
Yeah.
uh, what did you start off with, and were those drugs or alcohol that you used, was it for the purpose of kind of escaping that life?
So actually, we ended up losing our house like right before I went into the eighth grade because of the financial issues that go along with depression and alcoholism. And we moved to from LA to Bakersfield, and I hated it. I've always viewed myself as like this city kid, and I thought Bakersfield was the armpit of California, and I was too cool to be there. And I was miserable. And that is at 14 when I actually first tried my first drug, which was meth. I didn't like start with, smoking weed or whatever. I just went straight to meth. So, and I would drink and stuff. Obviously, at that point in my life, I never thought of it consciously as like this was an escape, but it was offered to me. I tried it. I fell in love, and then I just wanted to get my hands on it as much as possible. And not so much with drinking. I kind of hated the way drinking made me feel, but yeah, meth was definitely my first drug of choice. And it was just, yeah, it was an escape. It was the only time that I remember ever feeling like happy, I guess.
Yeah. And at what point did you move on to, other drugs like opioids, as an example?
I dabbled a little bit, like maybe a few times with pills as a teenager, but it wasn't until I was probably 18 and I moved out that I started taking Vicodin. And originally, actually, I had suffered with like really horrible, like chronic back pain since I was about 9. and never knew what it was. And then I tried pills, and that was also the first time in my life where I had relief, and that was also about a year after I started using pills, Vicodin and Norco, that I discovered I had like a pretty moderate case of scoliosis. And so that was the answer to that. But that was about the time that I started taking opiates. And yeah, I fell in love, and there was really no turning back.
During that time, you said you'd moved out when you were 18, and
Yeah.
were you like kind of functioning and maintaining a life and working and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. I started working really young at 14, and I actually was pretty successful in school. And I graduated high school and started college at 16. And so by the time I was 18, I was done with my prereqs at university, and I was working full time. I was moving up the managerial ladder at a retail store I was working at. So I was a store manager. I was going to school full time, living on my own. So I would say that I was definitely like a functioning addict for sure.
Was there a moment like that for you where the drugs became so invasive in your life, or your addiction became so invasive in your life that you kind of fell off and you weren't able to function at that level anymore?
My story is I kind of feel like I had these two parallel tracks. So, like, my high school sweetheart that I was with for like 4 years ended up cheating on me. And that at like 18. And that was like one of the most devastating experiences that I'd ever gone through at that age. And very soon after that, I met this guy who I thought was like my saving grace. I didn't know anything about codependency or narcissism or any of these things. And I was so young and naive, ignorant, vulnerable. He was 10 years older than me. I was 18, he was 28. And so I was keeping my life together. I was really doing well for myself. And then I met this guy. And I don't know, it was insanity. I stayed with him for 4 years, despite it being an extremely, I mean, I can't even begin to describe the amount of like psychological, mental, and emotional abuse that this person put me through. These relationships that are so sick and toxic are just as addictive and dangerous as the drugs. And who knows if I maybe would have been able to maintain, but that relationship was really when things started going downhill for me. And as I started falling apart in that relationship, I started using more to cope. And my job performance started, declining. After about 4 years, I finally had enough and decided to leave and get a restraining order. And I didn't know who I was. Like, I was just this empty shell of a person. And that relationship made up my entire identity. And I was so broken. I started using Coke with my pills and to try to like increase the effectiveness. And then I started learning how to cook crack. And so I was cooking crack, doing Coke, and taking pills. And I was also dealing to try to support my habit. And that was when my Connect basically introduced me to black tar. And actually, at first, I kind of didn't like it. I was like, I like pills more, but it was cheaper. And I mean, I can't even tell you how much money I was spending on pills. And that was about the time pills were, I think, like 2010, that pills became like impossible to get. And I smoked for a while and ended up going in the detox and rehab circuit for a long time, or it felt like a long time. And actually, it was in my second or third rehab that's when I started using intravenously. And it was just off from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand is that for many of us in recovery, it's uh, it's something that we had to attempt many, many times,
Yeah.
right? It's like there is a part of our identity that knows that they're sick and they want to get better, and then there's part of our identity that's still dealing with trauma in the past and the pain, and there's part of our identity that is kind of a slave to this addiction,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like this disease of more, where no matter what, you got to have it. And you find, I always found myself in a battle in my head between those three things, but the addiction always won because it helped you rationalize, even if it was illogical. it would
Yeah.
help you rationalize in a way to keep using. Was there any one particular thing that happened to you, or one series of events that happened to you that said, okay, this time I'm going to make this work. I'm going to try again to go back into that circuit of rehab and see what I can do to get better?
Well, for me, once I started using IV, I tried getting clean on my own and whatnot, and like none of the rehabs would take me back. And things were going on in my family, and there was kind of breaking point with my family that something happened, and that was the point where I think it was like late 2012 or early 2013. I just snapped and I just took a backpack and like whatever money I had, I think it was like $800 and the clothes on my back. And I called a cab and I said, take me to Skid Row. And halfway through the like car ride there, I changed my mind. I said, never mind, take me to Venice. And that was the first night that I became homeless. And I ended up spending like the next nearly 4 years on the streets of West LA and whatnot. I met a guy my first day there, and we were partners. Like he was my boyfriend, and we were partners on the street together for those, like, I'll just say 4 years basically. And I remained homeless. We would live in like Venice, Marina Del Rey, and commute to Skid Row every single day until we got connects down on the west side. And obviously being homeless on the street is not easy, even with, a partner there. And he ended up getting arrested. He had 2 strikes on his record, and he ended up getting put away for a while. I had no idea what happened to him once he got taken away. I thought maybe he finally got thrown in prison or something. And I got the call from him like 3 months or 4 months after not seeing him, and he said he wasn't coming back. He got offered rehab and he was going to take it. And that's when I realized I was finally like for real alone. And in a very short period of time, my health was declining. I was like 89 pounds. I had 6 cats on the street because my one cat got pregnant. So I had a cat and 6 kittens. I was alone. I had like a massive heroin habit and meth. And after I found out that he wasn't coming back, I was alone with these cats, with this addiction, falling apart. My teeth were falling apart. I was in like excruciating pain all the time. And then I was assaulted by some random person. I was basically like curb stomped by this juggalo. And and then another assault happened shortly after that, about a month after that. And that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just said, like, I can't do this anymore. And luckily, my mom, the whole time I was on the street, even though originally when I went on the street, we weren't talking, I refused to see her, but she never gave up. And she spent like 6 months looking for me down on the boardwalk every weekend. And after all those months of me like refusing to see her, something about being on the street after my whole life of holding these resentments against my parents for my childhood, I don't know, like getting to my lowest point, I was finally able to release this resentment that had been killing me, this like toxic, cancer living inside me, because I think I was able to finally see myself objectively. Like if I'm able to get to this point, anybody can. Not saying that like I'm anything special, but like they are humans too, and they were only able to give me like what they were given, you know. And so my mom never gave up, and she every weekend she'd come see me for like an hour for lunch, and she always told me that her doors were open whenever I was ready. And she went from being my whole life very controlling to finally realizing that like just be there, like don't try to, you can't make me quit, like it had to be me. And also I had a like massive staph infection in my neck from shooting up. I had a blood clot in my jugular that put me in the ICU for 12 days that nearly killed me. And so all these things between that, and I finally just called her and said, I'm ready. I'm ready to come home, basically.
And
And
when was that? What
um
year? What year was that?
2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so let me just backtrack a second
Yeah.
for our viewers. You said that
Mhm.
when you were out there on the street, you commuted every day to Skid Row. That
Yeah.
was to score your drugs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Until you found your connections out on the west side in
Yeah.
Venice. Okay.
Mhm.
Right. And do you want to talk about that at all? Like how do you score or where you score? I know like in
Mhm.
San Francisco, you could just walk up to like 10 different street corners and
Yeah.
the guys are right there slinging. Is it
Mhm.
the same kind of setup on Skid Row?
I mean, there is definitely that. My boyfriend on the street, basically I met him because I just went up to some random person in Venice and was like, I need heroin. He's like, talk to Dave, and Dave knew someone on Skid Row. So we'd take the bus there, we'd go to this payphone, we'd call the guy, he'd be like, okay, I'm coming down. And he'd come down and we either trade cash pay cash or trade the EBT card,
Got it.
and you get half. But so we had like a regular person. But of course, there were times like if he wasn't around, you could literally walk up to anybody and be like, you got it, you got it, you got it. Or people just see you and they're like, you want, you want, you want,
Right.
anything. So it's just available.
Right.
Needles, paraphernalia, drugs, whatever you want. Yeah. It's like a buffet.
Would you say it's organized, the drug dealing?
I would say it's like organized disorganization. I don't know how to describe. I mean, all these people know each other. I mean, there's got to be organization to a certain extent, but I mean, really, I don't think I could speak too much to the inner workings of Skid Row because we would only go there, like use and immediately leave
Got
because
it.
making all the money was like on the west side, so that's where we would spange and fly signs or steal or whatever. We just go there and come back.
Let's fast forward back
Yeah.
to when you decided to give recovery a try in
Mhm.
2016 again.
Yeah.
You went to rehab?
I didn't.
You did not. Okay.
No.
So what did you do?
Okay. So those things that happened to me, one of the main reasons that I wanted to get off the street was, like I said, like the medical issues I was having, the medical and dental issues I was having. And I needed emergency surgery, basically. And they refused to operate on me if I was using. And when I got off the street and came home, I actually still was using. I had plans on quitting, but hadn't really committed. But they said they would operate on me if I was on methadone. And I had actually always been opposed to methadone. I didn't really see the point. I don't know. But I needed this. So I agreed to it. And that is what got me on methadone. And originally I was using methadone and heroin for about 4 months. And I tried to titrate off the methadone and titrate off the heroin. And when I got to 2 milligrams and like a speck of hair, I was just like, I couldn't take that last step. And I finally went back to my clinic and I said, I can't do this. I'm trying to do it my way. Like instead of listening to those who have done this before, have the experience, have the knowledge. And I said, I'm doing this for real this time. And the last day I used was August 24th, 2016. And I went back up on my methadone and I've basically been on treatment since. But for the past 2 years, about 2 years, I don't know the exact date, I decided that this isn't something I want to be on forever. I've gotten to the point where I'm stable. Like I have my family back. I have my brain and functioning and my stability in my life. And so I knew that this was the time to start doing it. And so ever since then, I started titrating very slowly. First, it was like 5 milligrams every 2 weeks. And then as I got lower, 4 milligrams, 3 milligrams, so forth and so on. And now I'm down to 6 milligrams and I go down 1 milligram about every month. And I haven't had any issues so far, and I'm almost done. And I'm looking forward to that day that I can finally be free from everything. But I will say that I had my own stigmas about methadone and judgments about who used it and why they used it. And I know a lot of people do abuse it, and I did when I first started. But I know that also this was the first time in my life, despite all the rehabs I've been to, the detoxes, the AA, the NA, the every 12-step program, therapists, counselors, like PTSD specialists, whatever the case may be. And I've never been able to get more than like 6 months clean, never. And I can't attribute it all to just the methadone. Who can say? I think that at those times I still had reservations. At those times I was younger. I just wasn't ready. I needed to fall further before I was ready. So, but I do think it gave me the chance to feel okay physically so that then my mind and heart could follow.
That's
That was
great.
my experience, at least.
That's amazing. Wow. That's really amazing. So look, I just want to use this opportunity for all my critics out there. You know, I'm a pretty big time advocate now that I support medically assisted treatment.
Yeah.
I support people like you, Lauren, that are doing what you need to do to have a life again. And I think you're a hero. I think you're a real hero. And I think that you're showing everyone how harm reduction can be a positive influence on someone's life. And I think it's important your story gets told so that we can talk about how harm reduction can be helpful versus some of the more radical things that are happening now where they're talking about heroin assisted treatment and fentanyl assisted treatment for individuals, which is a big, huge difference from taking methadone and working on the pursuit of recovery like you are
Yeah.
to eventually titrate off of it because that's what you want to do,
Yeah.
not what someone's telling you to do. And I think that that's wonderful,
Exactly.
and you're a hero for doing that. So thank you. How are things today for you? What's your life like today in recovery?
Well, to be honest, this isn't my place. This is my mom's place.
Okay.
I am still living at home and I'm extremely grateful. And I feel like #blessed because a lot of people don't have this family support and they don't have these opportunities. And honestly, I feel like there's a part of me that feels like I shouldn't considering everything I've put my family through. So I really do feel lucky, especially because when I came home, my mom was in better health than she is now. It was fated that I came home when I did because she got diagnosed with some autoimmune issues and I've been able to be there for her. So I help care for her now. And I've just recently started working again, but basically I've been able to take this time with the support of my family to really get myself in order because in the past I always would like get 30 days or something and like jump right back into everything full throttle and I would just self-sabotage. Like I would move too hard too fast, and anytime any little thing happened I didn't know how to cope and would inevitably go back. And so basically I've just been really focusing on my recovery and my family and figuring out what I want to do that gives me purpose in life. And so I've been really active in ACA. Actually is like the new thing that I've been active in, adult children of alcoholics, to really like nail down more of the childhood issues that have caused me to end up where I am and my role in those things. And so I'm looking forward to doing more discovery in that. And I think my life, I mean, honestly, I shouldn't be here. I'm lucky I got out when I did because I feel like I got out right before fentanyl really took off. And I can't really tell you how many people, even in the past, year, 2 years, 3 years, that I've known that I've had to, mourn and grieve over. Just recently buried another friend, my partner of 4 years from the street, died of a fentanyl poisoning 3 years ago. And so I really feel like I shouldn't be here, but I am. And so I just want to use whatever voice I have in my experience to try to help others or prevent anybody from falling in the same trap that I fell into.
I think a lot of us in recovery, like I got off the street in 2018, just when fentanyl was hitting San
Yeah.
Francisco really hard, and I know 11 people that have died from fentanyl overdose, and so there's more and more of us that I know that I talk to in recovery where it's like we're exchanging numbers, and it's like there's some people I know that know 40 people that have died.
Yeah.
So my 11 seems small in comparison, whereas just your normal average everyday person might know two people in their life that have died, and it's usually their grandparents.
I,
And until we find some type of balance between that health crisis and also the criminal justice aspect, I guess you can
yeah.
say, we're going to continue to see people die. I don't know if you agree with that sentiment or not.
I completely agree with it because in the past, all those reservations I had about using, I never feared relapsing. It was like, oh, if I relapse, whatever, my time starts over, who cares? Of course, I was in a much more like apathetic state of mind back then. But now it's like sometimes the thought will cross my mind like, wow, like if I ever choose to, not that I have any plans to or want to, but like it's just like that's not even like a possibility because I know the chances of, especially if I relapse, it would be with heroin. And the chances of heroin being laced with fentanyl are like better than not. And don't, I don't think I'd survive it. And so it's like that has totally taken that off the table. And it just, yeah, all these people are just dropping dead from one time and they're being poisoned and it's an emergency and the numbers are astronomical. And really, I feel like the fact that more isn't being done is going to be looked back on in shame in the future. I think it is important to destigmatize addiction to the point that it's like it is a disease, I believe that in my heart. And whether it's like caused from nature versus nurture or a combination of the two doesn't mean that you have to enable people and coddle them to think that it's okay. Just because it's a disease doesn't mean it's not worth like fighting that disease, you know? And it's not okay to just watch everybody kill themselves a slow, agonizing, demoralizing death, I mean, what was I on the street? I was just, nothing. I was hopeless. I was helpless. I was just, like I said earlier, it's just a shell of a human being. And it's like by pure chance, I think that I've made it out. And I just think it's a travesty, really, what's happening.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're a beautiful human being.
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad that you're here and that you took the time to talk to me today.
Thank
I'm
you.
truly grateful for your story. I'm grateful for your recovery.
Thank you.
And, I'm going to put your message out there, and I really, truly hope that people listen and take heed from people like you and people like me that are in recovery, that have lived on the street, and we're out here speaking truth. And I think that's what needs to be heard is the truth. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
This
you
is
so much for having me.
this is Tom Wolf, and this is Voices of Recovery. Thank you so much.